Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami ito parang sakajang dhammo so tapoti. Okay, welcome everybody. Good to see some people here. It's very nice. Hopefully you've all come to listen to the Dhamma, but also do some gardening as well. It'll be quite nice. We can pick the weeds out of our mind, and we can pick the weeds out of the front garden as well. So that's probably a good thing to do today. So filling in for Chi Kwang Sanim today. She's obviously not feeling too well at the moment, so we all hope that she gets better and she recovers soon. I just thought, okay, well, Chi Kwang's not here. I'll step in and help, do what I can. And because I think in some way, at least I know for myself, whenever there's some kind of opportunity to help, just okay, great. I'll get in and I'll try to help wherever I can. Do what I can do. And I think in some way everybody has this kind of sense of wanting to contribute in some way, wanting to be a part of something, wanting to be a part of something where you can do something that's a little bit above and beyond yourself. So I thought that's what I might talk about today in the spirit of the working bee as well. We'll talk about and discuss this. How do we fulfill this sense of purpose and meaning that we might have through contributing and helping out to others and helping out to others that are close to us, but also others that are in a group or in a community? How do we contribute in the best way to give ourselves this sense of meaning? And then also the further question on top of that is how, when we're in these kinds of situations, in these kinds of groups and these kinds of communities, how do we contribute the best way possible? How do we improve the state of this thing that we're trying to contribute to? And how do we do this in the most harmonious and unified kind of way? And so, the first thing with this, if we are looking for, again, most of us are very isolated. We sort of live in our own little bubble. It's like, well, how do we actually get out there and do something that is of contribution? And I think this is, like, what we're doing today is actually a very good way to do this. We're doing something physical. We're all actually physically coming together to do a little bit of gardening, a little bit of maintenance to the place. Having this working bee today, this is actually quite a good first step for people if you're trying to get involved in some kind of community. Just doing these small things, you don't need a lot of skills to pull out some weeds. You don't need any kind of great skill sets. Anybody can do it. Also, it really can be a way for people that, if you've been coming here for 30, 40 years, or if today's your very first day of being here, this is actually a way that you can get in and contribute in some kind of way. A lot of the times we might think, oh, well, I want to help out in some way, but I don't know where to start, or I don't know what to actually do. So things like we're doing today, this is quite a nice place for everybody to start, and everybody can get involved. It's not something that anybody is above in any way, or that anybody is below. There's this really nice, we might sort of look and go, I don't want to like dig the dirt. I don't want to do those kinds of things. But if we sort of look at some of the stories in the time of the Buddha, there was a monk called Sariputta. And if anybody knows who Sariputta is, he was, if you're thinking the Buddha's the number one, Sariputta was basically like number 2 or number 3. Sariputta was the foremost in wisdom. He was, knew basically everything about the Dhamma, such a well-respected monk. And in the later years of his life, he getting too old, he couldn't go out on alms round anymore. So what he'd do when everybody else has gone out on alms round is he'd stay in the monastery, and he'd walk around the monastery, and if he'd see if there's anywhere that needed sweeping, he'd sweep it up. If there was rubbish there, he'd pick the rubbish up. If there's anything out of place, he'd straighten it all up. And this is somebody that's, for all intents and purposes, he's a very high member of the Sangha, but he's still doing things like picking rubbish up. So the reason they say Sariputta did this was because he was trying to develop faith in people that don't have faith. And the people that do have faith, he's trying to increase that faith, and also doing it as a way of not allowing, wanderers from other sects or wanderers from other belief systems to criticize the monks. These monks, they're very untidy. They're not looking after the place well. So he did this as a way of being very humble and just getting in and helping and doing what needed to be done. And so this is, this is something that we all can do. We just get in and help out in any way we can. And a part of getting in and helping out on a physical way like this is that, not everybody's a perfect gardener. Not everybody's a perfect cleaning things in this way. Whenever we volunteer for something, we're not always good at it. But this doesn't matter at all. What's important is the intention to actually get in there and help out and contribute in some kind of way. So this is one of the first ways that we can develop a sense of meaning and purpose that's beyond ourselves to something bigger by contributing to some kind of community or group or something like this. But this leads us to the next thing. Well, what happens when we get together in a group of people? What happens when a lot of people get together and work on something? Most of the time, it's pretty good. Other times, there's problems. I know for myself, when I look at people doing things, I look at them and I go, I could do that better. I could do that better. And just let me do it. I'll do it better than you. I always do this, and so we always tend to go, well, there's some sort of conflict there, or there's some sort of misunderstandings there. So how do we actually work together in a community well? Now, again, we can sort of look back on the life of the Buddha, and we can sort of get some examples of this. You might think in your own life at the moment, your own family, maybe your own family doesn't get along, or you go to work and people argue with each other, and we look at the government, we look at politicians, and it's like, how come they don't get along? Wars, all these kinds of things. Why aren't people getting along in some kind of way that are trying to work towards some sort of common goal? And if we look at these, we might think that this is only something that's out in the world. But if you look at the monastic community as well, you look at the monks, they were always arguing. They were always fighting. There was always some kind of problem, issue that was happening, and the Buddha had to step in a lot of times and ameliorate that. So, this happens in every section of society when we get together as some kind of group. We have misunderstandings, and there's a few places in the suttas, in the early Buddhist texts, where the Buddha had to come in and mediate between the monks because they were fighting so much. There was one, and so today you're getting in and maybe helping out and using tools and all these kinds of things, and you might look at somebody and go, oh, they're not using the tool properly. One of the big arguments that came about in the time of the Buddha was that the monks, they split into factions, and they were arguing about how you put a water dipper in the toilet. How you actually place this thing, and the Buddha tried to step in and ameliorate this conflict, but he couldn't do it, so he just had to leave. The monks kept arguing. He did this with what's in a place called the Kosambi, and there's a few places in the early Buddhist texts, and one's the other Kosambi Sutta. There's two places, but this one the Buddha actually was able to settle them down and get them happening harmoniously again. And they were arguing about some kind of view, some kind of opinion, some kind of belief, some kind of action. It's not really clear exactly what it was. But the Buddha got all the monks together because, they're all arguing. And he said to them, well, okay, you're all arguing. So, and he used this like really, really sort of visceral kind of word. He said, when you're using your words as weapons to stab each other, when you're doing this, do you have bodily acts of kindness both towards somebody's face and behind their back? Do you have verbal acts of kindness to their face and behind their backs? Do you have mental acts of kindness towards their face and behind their backs? And obviously they said, well, no, we're all arguing, like we're not being kind to each other. And the Buddha, he could get pretty solid with people, and he basically called them fools, a bunch of fools, and that what they were doing was not leading to their happiness, it was leading to their suffering. So, yeah, so the Buddha, put the smack down on them kind of thing. And so then he talked about, what he talked about is, well, how do we make ourselves amiable? How do we make ourselves unified in some kind of way? What are the causes for us to be harmonious together as a group, as a community? And he gave what he called 6 conditions for us to be harmonious and get on with each other. And the first condition is that you have bodily acts of goodwill towards someone, both towards their face and behind their back. And it's an important one. You have verbal speech that has goodwill both toward their face and behind their back. You have mental acts of goodwill both to their face and behind their back. And I'm not sure how you have mental acts of goodwill to somebody's face and behind their backs because they're mental, but you get the idea anyway. The fourth thing that he recommended that you do is that any kind of gains or any kind of opportunity that you have, never consume this alone. Always share it. And the fifth is that any kind of moral transgressions or moral shortcomings that you might have, you make these known to everybody else and make people know about your shortcomings in the moral sense. And the sixth is to have right view that leads to the end of discontent, and to be in congruence with other people that have this kind of right view. And so we have these 6 conditions of how to function well in a community, how to function well in a group. And of these, the Buddha said that number 6, having right view, is the pinnacle, it's the highest. He compared it to, the peak of a roof. If any of them are the highest, it's having right view. And so, this is well and good, but okay, so what's right view then? Like, how do you actually know that we've got right view? This is a harder one because it's, you can think, well, okay, well, I am being kind by my body, my speech, my mental actions. I'm owning up to my moral shortcomings. I'm sharing things, but it's harder to know how we have right view. And if we think back to what the sutta's talking about, this is a disagreement between people. Each side thought they were of right view. And so instead of the Buddha saying, well, you fix the other person's wrong view, what he recommended that you do is you fix your own right view first. So the Buddha gave 7 conditions for checking actually if we're actually somebody of right view. And the first condition is that we go to somewhere that's very quiet. We go to somewhere that's removed from people. And we go and do some meditation. And what we do is we ask ourselves, the thing that we ask ourselves is, do I still have any faults in my own mind that I haven't abandoned? Is there something in my own mind that's still being a cause for me to have some kind of suffering? Do I have desire? Do I have ill will? Do I have restlessness? Do I have any kind of dullness in the mind? Do I have worry in the mind? And if you do have these things, it's fine. It's okay. You're human. It's not a problem. But if you have these things, this is an impediment to having right view. And so it's fine. You have to just go back and work on it. You have these things. And if you don't have these things, that's great. That leads on to the next. That leads on to the next thing of checking if you have right view. And you check if this, this belief, this view, this behavior, this whatever you're actually going about, is this something that is leading to stillness? And is it something that's leading to liberation? And if it's not, then you have to readjust your actions, you have to readjust your speech, you have to readjust your views. And it's good, but if it is, that's great, that's fine, that's a good thing to do. And this leads on to the third, fourth, and fifth one that I'll group together, is that you have to ask yourself, when I look at other people that are of good standing, am I living up to those kinds of standings as well? Do I have those kinds of good qualities as well? The moral way that I'm engaging in the world, do I have any kind of shortcomings there? And is there any way that I can improve them? Also, any of the responsibilities or jobs or things like this that I have, even though I do have these things, am I still committed to seeking liberation through seeking the higher mind, through higher morality, higher concentration, higher wisdom? And if we maybe answer no to any of those things, it's like, well, again, we have to readjust what we're doing. And finally, but if we do feel like we're having these things, then essentially we move on to the next thing. Do we listen to the Dhamma? Do we listen to the Dhamma? Do we listen to the Dhamma free of conceit? Do we listen to it with humility? And then do we understand what the Dhamma is, and do we actually take it in and practice it? And so these are the ways that we can check if we're actually somebody of right view. And essentially here, what we have to look at is when the Buddha's talking about having harmony between people, he's not talking about looking out to other people. He's talking about looking inwards towards ourselves and trying to fix ourselves first before we move this out into the world. So if we can do these things, develop these 6 facets of having bodily acts, mental acts, verbal acts that are both kind to people's face and behind their back. We can share the opportunities that we have. We have a good moral standing, and we're somebody that's that has right view, and we check ourselves in this way. Then actually we'll be somebody that is very harmonious and very useful for the place. And so there is this aspect here of having to reflect on who we are all the time. This is what makes us a useful and good person and allows us to contribute in some kind of way. I was talking to yesterday, 2 days ago. I was actually talking to a lady that came, and she practices Dhamma, and she said what she does she does this every night without fail. Doesn't matter if she's 1 o'clock in the morning and she still hasn't gone to bed, but every night she actually sits down and writes about all her interactions in the day, all the things, all the way that she interacted with people, all the kinds of mind states she had when she was interacting with people and with things. And she looks for patterns in her reactions and her behavior, and seeing actually, is there some way that I'm falling into these patterns here? Is there some way that I can improve myself? And she came with her family, obviously, and her family said, since she's been doing this every day without fail, that she's becoming a more harmonious and more kind person to everybody around her, with her family, with her daughters, with also in her workplace. She's becoming a more generous and harmonious person. So this is something that's it's a really good practice to do. Like I'm not even that introspective about myself. It's like she's doing really, really well. So there are plenty of things that we can do where we really have to look within ourselves to see how we can be a course of good for the world, how we can be a course of amiability, how we can be a course of harmony. And so if we're looking at this, then if we're thinking back to the original question, how do I become somebody that can contribute and get a sense of meaning and purpose by contributing to some kind of community? And when I'm doing this, how do I be the best member of that community? So this is, if we look at what the Buddha said of having these, asking ourselves continually, these bodily, verbal, mental acts of kindness, sharing what we got, etc. This is the way that we become the best and most useful member of community. So what this shows us is that when we're thinking about having this kind of purpose, it's not about what we can get out of something. but more about what we can give to others in some way. Or if you think about it another way, not just thinking about what's wrong out there, but how can I best contribute to this to make it better in some kind of way. And if you're somebody like that, we're all in, we all go to work, we all do these things, and the people that are like that are actually the people that are most, beneficial, most useful, most kind. They're the people that you really want to be around. And so what this requires us to be a person that has some kind of integrity. This requires us to be a person that has some kind of good standing. And so we have to ask ourselves, well, what is a person of integrity? What is somebody that's like that? What is somebody that is useful for the group, for the community, for society as a whole? What's that kind of person like? And the Buddha also as well gave clues about gave some teachings about what a person of integrity is. There's a teachings called the Katanyu Sutta where he talks about gratitude. And he said that a person of no integrity is somebody that is not grateful and they don't know how to repay the good acts that have been given to them. But somebody of integrity is somebody who's grateful and knows how to reciprocate and knows how to pay things back. There's another sutta called the Saporisa Sutta. It's in the Anguttara. There's a longer one in the Majjhima Nikaya, but this is the shorter one, where the Buddha talks about, again, what is a person of integrity and what is a person of no integrity. And he said a person of no integrity is somebody that, now hopefully I'll get this right. Person of no integrity, when they're not asked, they speak about somebody else's bad points. And even if they're pushed further, then they continue to talk about this person's bad points totally in full. But when they're asked about a person's good points, they don't talk about another person's good points. And when they're pushed to identify some of their good points, they only do it minimally. And furthermore, when they're not asked, they talk about their own good points to the cows come home kind of thing. And then when somebody gives them a little bit of, oh yeah, you are a great person, aren't you? They talk about them in full. So it's just like full-blown sort of narcissism kind of thing. And finally, when they're asked, this is a person of no integrity, when they're asked about their own bad points, they don't tell anybody about their own bad points. And when they're pushed to identify them, they only identify them minimally. And the person of integrity, but what is a person of integrity? It's the opposite of this. A person of integrity is when they're not asked, they speak about a person's good points. And then if they're pushed a little bit more about it, they even talk about them more in full. But when they're asked about a person's bad points, then they don't talk about the other person's bad points. And if they're pushed about it, they only give minimal clues as to maybe what this person's bad points could be. And when they're unasked about themselves, they tell everybody about their bad points. So they don't need to be asked, they can tell you about their bad points already. And then when they're pushed further on it, then they fully tell you exactly all the bad points. You don't have to go too far. But and the last thing is when somebody asks that person about their good points, they don't really tell anybody about their own good points. And when they push them on it, they only give a minimal thing. So we can see a person of integrity is somebody that has gratitude and knows how to repay this back, and is somebody that speaks well of others, doesn't sort of dwell on people's bad points, is very open about their own bad points and doesn't really talk too much about their own good points. And so if we think this kind of person, if you are around this kind of person, what kind of impact would that have on you? Of a person of integrity like this. If this person was in a group, what kind of positive impact would that person have on the group? Would they have on the community? And if you think about this even further, it's like, what would it be like if you were that person? If you were that person that was of good integrity in this way and had this kind of gratitude, what could you contribute to the group? What could you contribute to the community? If you were this kind of person, would this really give you a sense of purpose and meaning? And I really do think it would. And if we think about things from like a communal or a group kind of perspective, what if the whole group is filled with people like that? What kind of community is that? That's a very strong community. That's a very thriving community. But if the other side, if there's of no integrity, it's like, I think, we all know people that are maybe have no integrity in this way, and they're not so great to be around. So this is the thing, we have to essentially try to make ourselves a person of integrity and try to make ourselves be a person that is grateful and thankful. A lot of times when you give these talks, some people, they go, well, I'm a person of integrity, and I had this thing with these other people, and they're not the people of integrity, and they say these kinds of things. And if you're thinking this, you've missed the point. Again, remember what the Buddha's talking about. This is about improving yourself. This is not about looking at other people and going, they need to change. It's about changing something within yourself. It's about making yourself a person with right view and with integrity. So if we can do this, then this is so important, because then we're not looking out in the world to improve everything. We're actually looking inwards to try to improve ourselves and make ourselves more useful. We're not looking at things out in the world and going, God, that's wrong. Why doesn't somebody fix that? We go, I'm a person of integrity. I'm going to try to contribute the best way that I possibly can to make this better. So becoming a person of integrity changes us from looking at problems outside in the world to looking at things and going, oh, okay, well, there's something sort of wrong there. How do I best contribute to help to make that thing better? How do I actually do this? And okay, this thing that's out here in the world at the moment, this is good, but how can we, how can I get together and contribute in a positive way to make it even better? So this really speaks a lot to developing, we talk, obviously we talk in Buddhism a lot, we talk about, you ask, what's the essence of Buddhism? And people will say kindness and compassion. And that's, look, that's well and good, but what about mudita as well? Having mudita, anybody that doesn't know, having mudita is this sense of having a sense of altruistic joy in the goodness of others. And I do see it as, actually, I've been thinking about this a little bit, and there's something about mudita as well. It's like a form of gratitude that we have. Looking at the goodness of others is, we're grateful that somebody else is good. And we're grateful as well, and we want to pay that back in some kind of way. We want to reward that. So when we look around, we look at all the people that are around us. We try to focus on the good. Try to have mudita for the good actions that they do. For example, here, there's so many people that contribute to, opening the doors today, turning the lights on. There's so many volunteers that help out. There's the committee that helps out and gives a lot of their time and attention and gives up a lot. There's the Sunday Dhamma school. They come here to teach children about the Dhamma. There's the citizen that whenever something's on, they're always there to help, and they're always there to give everything that they possibly can. There's the teens group, and all these people that actually contribute and help out. All these people in the kitchen today that are helping out. Everybody that's doing the sound and all these kinds of things. There's so many people that are giving up to help us. So they're trying to be people of integrity, and they're trying to do the best they can. So when we see this, we should try to reward it in some way. And we should try to pay that back. We should try to be a person of integrity towards them. And so if we can do this, I think this is how we build this sense of purpose within ourselves. This kind of connection that we want with people, this kind of connection that we want with something bigger than ourselves, this sense of meaning, this sense of purpose. I think this comes through doing these things, these physical things where we get together, try to work with each other, and then seeing when you're getting together and things aren't working out, how do we actually be a person of integrity with that? How do we be a person that has gratitude as well? Really always trying to focus on that and trying to move towards that. I think this is really the most useful and beneficial way forward. So again, we think how do we contribute to something bigger than us? How do we be involved in a community? How do we make a community strong? Is we look at this by saying, not what I can get out of this thing, but what I can give to it. By not looking at what's wrong with something, but what can I actually contribute to actually make this thing better. Because communal harmony and having a harmonious community, it doesn't start with the community. It starts with you. It starts with yourself. It starts with this one person. And it starts by being a person of integrity and being a person that is grateful as well. I think this is if we practice like this, then there's no sort of problems in the world. So with that, that's probably enough of me going on a monologue. So if anybody has any questions now, anything they want to discuss, you're more than welcome to ask any questions.
Thank you, Bhante, for a lovely talk. The Buddha has elsewhere described about character of a person. There are 4 things he has talked about: the virtue, integrity, fortitude, and wisdom. And he says that if one has to check on somebody else's virtue, integrity, wisdom, and fortitude, one has to have all those qualities yourself. One has to have, and one has to associate with these people for a long time. Otherwise, there's no way you can judge or assess the person has those qualities. As you said earlier, that's very true. That this is for yourself. You have to develop yourselves. Don't judge the others. If each one develops those qualities oneself, it's impossible to judge others without having those qualities yourself.
So anybody that maybe knows or doesn't know, as a monk, we have a lot of rules. We have a lot of rules, and we sort of see our fellow monks either doing them or breaking them, and this is sort of how it goes. And so we have all these these procedures of reprimanding people as well, and a lot of those procedures are involved with just that. You have to make sure yourself that you have those qualities as well. You have those qualities of you're doing it out of kindness in some kind of way. You're actually somebody that is keeping those kinds of moral standards, and so it really is something that we do have to work on if we want to see other people do something. We have to be an example of that. I'm sure a lot of you are parents. I was a child once, and whenever my mum would tell me to do something and she wasn't doing it herself, I'd be like, I'm not doing that thing. Even now when people tell me to do something, it's like, you don't do that. I'm not going to listen to you. So actually being a good example of these things and having these kinds of qualities, then you can actually guide people in some kind of way and tell people these things. But if not, then it's just sort of, we know it's like sort of hypocritical when people are like this. And look, I'm just as guilty of this as everybody. It's like, oh, I wish they'd do this. It's like, but I don't really do that. So yeah, it's about trying to develop these qualities in yourself and knowing any kind of shortcomings that you might have as well. Again, we don't have to be perfect people to interact with the world. Obviously, we're flawed in some kind of way. But we have to do the best that we can. We have to become the best kind of person that we can, and then we just work with that. We work out of that. Now, if just getting back to sort of what I was talking about, you have to be a person of right view to be of good assistance. A person of true right view is actually like an arahant, is fully enlightened. So, we don't want to go, well, I don't really have right view, so I can't say anything in the world. You do have to do something. You have to work towards trying to be somebody of right view. But, we're never going to be totally perfect. We're never going to be totally a person of integrity. But you do the best with what you can. Just try to improve, do as much as you can. And because if you're doing things out of that, then it's much easier for you to, people will listen to you a little bit more. So, yeah, try to do the thing yourself. It's, that's the hard thing. You got to walk your talk. So.
Ajahn, can we go to an online question?
Yeah, why not?
There's before I read the question, there's a term in here that I'm not familiar with. Yep. So it's Dhamma. So it's Dhamma with an A in front.
Dhamma, okay. Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
So the question is...
Basically it means anything that's not Dhamma.
Not Dhamma.
Yeah, something against the Dhamma. Yeah.
Ajahn, the doctrine of anatta is unique in the world. The mind, moment by moment, makes an identity. How do we recognize a Dhamma related to a sense of self coming into the mind from a myriad of sources? Goes on, labeling can be particularly potent and confusing labeling can be particularly potent and confusing form of identity making a Dhamma.
It's a good question. It's the kind of question I like. So hopefully just to check that I've understood this properly. So the question is hopefully something like not self. This is a very subtle realization to actually have, and we try to work towards seeing this and understanding this, but senses of confusion can come in the way. So sometimes we maybe think we're working towards something that's non-self, and we might be doing something like labeling or something, but actually we're building some kind of sense of self through doing that. So instead of it being a reflection that's Dhamma in this way, it becomes a reflection that's Dhamma. I'm hoping I'm understanding that question properly. Does that sound like a decent summary of it? Yeah, good enough. Well, that's what I'm going to answer. So I can't ask for clarification, so I'm going to answer it in that. So this is something I've actually been thinking about quite a lot lately in some kind of way, in that the teaching of non-self, this is something that is, or the realization of non-self and, enlightenment or liberation in this kind of sense, this is something that's unconditioned. This is something that's beyond, that is phenomena in its most natural state. Now, how do we actually get to that, though? This is a really difficult thing, because what we're dealing with is the conditioned world. And so in some way, we have to use the conditioned world to get to the unconditioned. Now, how do we do this? Again, we're operating with what we've got. We're essentially operating under this avijja or fundamental confusion. So in some way, we're using avijja to try to get to the place where you don't have any fundamental confusion. So essentially, we have to try to work with what we've got. So maybe with the realization of non-self, we're having to use these kind of labelings, and we're trying to tell ourselves things of like, okay, well, I've got this pain in my hip now. Okay, this pain in my hip, it's okay, this is not self, it's just a pain. Now, in some way, this kind of labeling and building a sense of self out of that, it's part of that, but it's something that's moving towards this realization of non-self. So we're using the conditioned to get to the point of the unconditioned. We're using it in a skillful kind of way. We're using conditioned phenomena in a skillful way. We're using mental states. We're putting in the kinds of causes of the kinds of mental states that will eventually lead us to that realization. But this is conditioned. This is actually something that's coming out of avijja. But it's skillful. and it's building skillful karma, and it's moving it in the right way. So you might say that, okay, well, you know, an example here could be something like, well, don't cling to the practice. Don't cling to the practice, because clinging is a form of adhamma in some kind of way. But in some respects, you know, we do have to cling to the practice. We have to put in the right kinds of desires that maybe are being formed from adhamma, but they're leading towards seeing the Dhamma. So we have to put in the right kind of causal conditioning that still is within the world of Dhamma to get to the point of Dhamma. Hopefully that answered the question, and hopefully that made sense. I'm thinking about this a lot, so you know, I don't have my thoughts always totally clear on it. So yeah, hopefully it made sense, and if it didn't, sorry. Yeah, okay.
I'll just have a question.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of leading on from that. So I've had a few chats with friends, and we're all in our 40s.
Yep.
And a lot of us are feeling that confusion, stripping, and like with the other comment about the woman writing in the journal, we're all listening to Dr. Gabor Mate and going back and right, getting references Buddha, but you know, finding out, oh, our habits are they're habits, they're not who we are, and you know, all that type of stuff. But I was thinking, you know, not sure if we're all having midlife crises, or we're actually like the difference between feeling like you're getting through and having a breakthrough and going through, you know, the dark night of the soul, that cliche, or we're just, you know, having a midlife crisis. Like,
aren't they the same?
Well, I don't know, and I think part of my confusion is I don't know, because I'm kind of getting pulled between, okay, this is all right, this is normal, you know, this is all good, stripping that away, this is normal to feel this bad, but then it's like I'm just, you know, on the other hand, clinging and obsessive about things and confusion and again, just kind of grasping. So
So I think, you know, sort of, and then just building on what I was talking about then, it's like there's something in there that might feel like it's unskillful, that's maybe leading to a further unhappiness in some kind of way, some kind of mindsets that are, you know, leading to this feeling of I'm having a midlife crisis, existence is meaningless, all these kinds of things. But I think if you can use a kind of a reflection in some kind of way that lays maybe your faults bare, lays your something that is bringing you kind of discontent, facing up to that. This is actually a very, very useful thing to do. So facing up to the point, well, actually, well, what actually is what kind of meaning do I have in my life? This actually forces us to go and find it. If we don't face up to this negative thing, we're never going to try to find a way out of it. And so if we look at something like the Four Noble Truths, the first noble truth is that there is dukkha. There is discontent, there is suffering. We can just sort of wipe that off and go, no, I don't want to think about that. But what the Buddha encourages us to do is look into it and accept it. So look into it. It's like, I'm 40, I'm having a midlife crisis. It sucks.
We're all like standing in fields of destruction, like we've just walked through landmines and gone, what is this?
Yeah, what did I... And I put a few of these landmines here for myself, and I've stepped on them now. So, so I think there is an aspect where you have to say, well, okay, is there these kinds of mental states when you're having this, and like, actually, is it leading to more suffering? Is that really leading to more suffering? And if I continue those kinds of habits, is it leading me into more and more dukkha? But am I having these kinds of thoughts as well? But is it leading me closer and closer towards freedom? Becoming free from maybe these habits that you actually have, helping you improve yourself in some kind of way. And if those are those kind of negative thoughts, they are leading in that way. This is what I mean by using the conditioned in some way to get to the unconditioned. Using a reflection that might be sort of seen as unskillful, but using it skillfully to get yourself out of some kind of hole. So yeah, it's a hard one, you know, and I think I probably speak for most people here. It's like, yeah, you do have to go through some kind of obstacles. You do have to go through some kind of pain in some kind of way to get to something that's useful. It's hard to face up to yourself and go, well, actually, I'm not a person of integrity. I don't do those things. Oh God, yeah. Do I always have mental states of goodwill towards others, both to their face and behind their back? It's like, no, I don't. Okay, I have to work on it. So it's not to say that you reflect in this way and you go, I'm a bad person. It's all fatalistic. It's all meaningless. No, it's like I have to work on it. So I think if it's building that kind of drive and that desire that, yeah, I do have to work on this thing and I do have to improve in some way, then I think it's moving in the right way. But if it's going in the other way of like, I'm just getting more and more depressed, I'm getting more and more anxious, then something needs to change about it. So yeah, does that make sense? Or, yeah, cool.
Thank you.
The one good thing about me, I'm 40, I'm in my 40s as well, and so I'm technically going through the midlife crisis, and one of the big things is usually like for men, we get bald. Like, I don't have to worry about that. It's like, cool, I'm bald, it's fine. Am I cool anymore? Do I dress well? It's like, I don't have to worry about this. I don't have to get new clothes or anything. My car, don't have a car, so my bank account, is my bank account full? And no, I don't have one. So I'm like, at least on those things, I'm okay. And my midlife crisis is just like, am I a terrible person?
Thank you, Ajahn. We'll go for another online question here. Yep. By having the same view in order to have harmony in a group, the Buddha is referring to having the same goals, isn't he? That is the Sangha that have the common view of Nibbana.
Yeah. That is right. Yeah, that's definitely right. That you have the same view, that you're all working towards the same common goal of Nibbana. That's a really good starting point. And like anything, if you're a part of a group or a part of a community that has a common goal, be that you're all working towards Nibbana or you're all working on a kind of project to, I don't know, help children or something like that, then you have that kind of common goal. So this is a useful starting point from a Buddhist perspective, that you're all working towards Nibbana. But sometimes that's just not enough. You all have the same kind of goal, but we all have sort of these personal differences as well. And so we have to try to work on these to some extent. So even though we have the same kind of goal, sometimes the way that we think that we can get to that goal, sometimes that's not in alignment, or the reality is like we all have this same goal, but we all forget the goal. And we get stuck down in the mud. We get stuck down in the vicissitudes of leaving a water dipper the wrong way in the toilet, kind of thing, and the monks all having a massive schism kind of thing. So, but I think it's also having that, if we remind ourselves that this is the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is liberation, is Nibbana. It helps us drop a lot of this smaller stuff. It helps us drop a lot of this personal misgivings that we have with each other. I know for myself, of being a monastic and living in the monastic form for quite a few years now, there's so many people that are monastics. It's like, if I was a layperson, there's no way I'd hang out with them. No way. It's like, I wouldn't hang out with this guy. I just wouldn't do it. We're not the same kind of personality. But because we have that commonality that we're working towards liberation, we can get along. We can live together. We can live in very close proximity to each other. And it's reminding ourselves that, look, this is the kind of family that I've got. This is the family that is really aimed towards something that's really high in life. Remembering that and trying to bring that up and go, yeah, okay, well, the guy takes all the food in front of me, and I'm annoyed at him, and he chews really loudly, and he like coughs and spits, and he's annoying, and all these kinds of. You can put all that down because it's like, well, look, he's doing the best he can, and he has the drive and the desire for liberation. So, okay, I can all the other stuff still annoying me, but I'll put it down. So there is something there about having a common goal that can keep you together, but you just have to keep remembering it. Again, we get bogged down in the mire of interpersonal problems, but try to get out of that every now and again. So yeah. Yeah, go for it.
So my question, Ajahn, is it's about a specific instruction the Buddha says quite frequently, sustaining this recollection. Say it again, sorry. Sustaining this recollection.
Yep.
And it's specifically, I mean, it could be applied to right view or anatta or anything. But there's been a practice that I've recently found, and it's kind of going against what some other teachers say about not thinking in practice.
Yeah.
And this specific meditation was posing the statement, me, to yourself, and contemplating the feelings that arise from that. And often it's pretty absurd to be like, oh, me.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm just wondering if you could maybe talk about your thoughts on that specific style of practice.
So is the style something, just you'll have to give me a little bit more information about the style. Is it something along the lines of building some kind of wholesome sense of self, some kind of positive sense of self, reflecting on one's good qualities in some way? Is that what it is, or?
It's more so. It's looking to see if the self is there.
Right. Yeah.
And this is what I made of the practice. I don't know if this is what they're intending, but and it's more so. It's inquiring through a thought,
right,
and then sitting in silence with the feelings that arise. And kind of my experience of it is hopefully watching that attachment dissipate.
So the idea is like you inquire into the self, what is a self, blah, blah, and you sit with that ambiguity, or you sit with that stillness that arises because of that. And it's not like you're trying to sustain the recollection, you're trying to open up something. Is that the idea, or?
Yeah, and the question is like, is that silence and observation of what arises, is that sustaining the recollection?
Right. I can see how it could be. Sustain. Obviously, the Buddha uses that phrase in a lot of places. One should sustain this recollection. Mindfulness of breathing. In metta and all these kinds of things. There's plenty of places where he talks about sustaining the recollection on something, sustain the recollection of the body, feelings, all these kinds of things. So, if this is a kind of practice that you find useful, then in some kind of way, the inquiry into the feeling of a sense of self, in a way you are sort of sustaining that recollection. So what does it mean to sustain a recollection? When we wander off, we bring the thing back. That is sustaining the recollection. The recollection goes somewhere else, and we bring the recollection back. So this could be seen as a way of sustaining the recollection. You pose the inquiry, you do the glimpse or whatever it is, and you sit with that ambiguity, you sit with what that feels like, and when it does, wander off again, and the sense of self comes back online, and you're you're trying to, you're just getting involved in it. Again, you sustain the recollection. What is this sense of self? So I think it could be. I think it could be a way of doing that. And if you find this practice useful, yeah, because let's use the other example of maybe you're trying to develop loving kindness throughout the day. And the way that you develop a way that you develop loving kindness throughout the day is you're constantly telling yourself, may I be happy, may I be well, may they be well, may they be happy. You're constantly sustaining that recollection throughout the day. So that would be a way to do that. Whenever you drift off into things that aren't that recollection, then you're not sustaining that recollection, but you're trying to sustain it, you're coming back to it. Now this recollection of the feeling of a sense of self, again, you're trying to reflect, but then have that period of silence, a period of stillness there. If that period of silence and stillness, once that starts to move again, you have to sustain the original reflection. You have to sustain it in that kind of way. So I don't think there's any incongruency there. I think that's probably a way that you can, sustain this recollection. Yeah. Does that answer the question? Or?
Yeah, definitely. Intuitively, I feel like my doubt's sort of gotten less, because it's sort of, I feel a sense of guilt for thinking in the practice. And so then when I bring my mind back to thinking, is this I? Is this not? Is this self? It feels like against some of the instructions. So the doubt, definitely, thank you for helping.
I think a big thing to remember as well is one thing the Buddha continually stresses, is this skillful or is this unskillful? And when we look at what karma is, basically we have skillful and unskillful karma. Skillful karma is something that leads us towards nibbana. Unskillful karma is something that leads us further into dukkha. And so if the kinds of thinking in that kind of way is skillful, then good, do it. It's leading towards liberation. If it's unskillful, then it's leading in towards dukkha, then you don't do it. So we have to see what is skillful and what is not skillful. And if we feel like this is skillful and leading towards more tranquility, liberation, just keep doing it. So, thinking's not bad. It's
I can see it relating back to that first question on Dhamma.
Yeah. Look, if you didn't think, man, you'd be a mess if you didn't think. So thinking's fine.
Thanks, Ajahn.
It's just how you're using your thinking.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Got time for one more question?
Well, then I'll ask one.
Yeah.
Ajahn, there's almost like this obsession to find out what right view is.
Yeah.
Right. But and I wonder whether somebody who believes they're in right view is actually in wrong view.
Yeah.
Right. So, but even though we may not know what right view is, certainly we generally know when we're in wrong view.
Yeah.
Right. There's the contraction that happens within the body.
Yeah.
There's all sorts of bodily things that go on that point us towards we're in wrong view.
Yeah.
So is it better to kind of focus on, all right, I'm in wrong view, and then be able to catch that time when we're in wrong view, and maybe eventually that starts to just take us towards right view?
Yeah, that sounds like never thought about it that way, but that really does sound like a useful way to go about it. It's we all know when we get angry or something like this. We all know that kind of visceral feeling that we get. So I think, because really truly having right view is very hard. You don't really develop full right view until you're an arahant, until you're fully liberated. So we're always operating out of avidya to some extent until we're actually enlightened. So we're trying to cure delusion with our own delusion in some kind of way, which is it's a bit of an infinite regress. And so I think that is a useful thing to, instead of going, well, am I somebody totally of right view, just to notice when we're in wrong view. And this is, in some kind of way, this is congruent with what I was talking about at the end of the talk, when the Buddha talks about looking within ourselves to see if we have right view. And essentially what that's doing is looking at the points where we're actually not incongruent. So if you have sensual desire, if you have ill will, if you have lethargy, if you have restlessness, if you have these things, if those things are coming up, then you can be reasonably sure. It's like, well, I'm maybe not in right view at the moment. So yeah, I think being, what would we say, like being attuned to those warning signals of when we're potentially falling into wrong view. I think that's probably the most parsimonious way to go about it, because they're pretty obvious. Like when I get selfish about something, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, no, I just want this thing for myself. When I get impatient about something, it's like, yep, okay, that's not a problem with the world. This is a problem with me. I'm impatient. Yep, this is okay. The alarm bell's gone off again. So yeah, I think that's actually, I could recommend people try that out in their practice. Sort of see, well, instead of going, am I a person of right view, seeing when am I actually falling into wrong view. Yeah, I think that's a good way to go. Okay, with that, we might call it a day. Is there any final announcements? Nope. No. Again, everybody's welcome to come over, and we'll do the arms round now. You're welcome to come over and have something to eat. And if you want to also stick around for a little while, or a little bit, help out a little bit today, clean up. It would be very much appreciated. Again, remember Sariputta. Sariputta is even Sariputta picked up rubbish. So let's all try and be a little bit more like Sariputta today. And so with that, we'll call it a day, and we'll pay respects to the Buddha Dhamma Sangha, and we'll go and have some lunch. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Buddhang Bhagavantang Abhivademi. Vakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipanno Bhagavato Akasangho Sanghang Namami. Cool. Very good. Hey, how's things?